Welcome, everyone. I've been looking forward to this. Um, I was out for about a month and a half, and because I had surgery, and so one of the first things I was trying to do when I got back was like, oh my God, let me get ready, let me think about this panel. Um, and today we're going to talk about freedom, about Black freedom, about Black liberation, and I feel like this is one of the most perfectly curated panels I've been a part of because in the hands of you all, and I feel like I'm feeling emotional. And I think part of it too is like being able to see y'all have this conversation. Like, as scary and as uncertain as things feel, when I see you all, when I read your posts and your tweets, when I happen to jump on calls and see you there, when I get text messages from you, I know that we will be all right, that my babies will be all right, that my babies will be all right because of the badass work that you all do. So, everyone, I am Nia Martin Robinson. I am the Director of Black Leadership and Engagement at Planned Parenthood Federation of America in the daytime, Black girl from Detroit all the time. Um, and most recently, a founding partner of an equity and culture shift firm called For the Culture, and a very proud board member of Spark for RJ. So I'm excited to be able to be here and talk to these amazing folks. So we have Ash Henderson on the panel, Che Long, Monica Ray Simpson, and Tamika Middleton. Ash is the first Black woman to hold the role of ED at Highlander Research and Education Center. Right, we got to snap it up for that, and a longtime activist working around issues of mountaintop removal mining, environmental racism, and a proud and active participant and on the leadership team of Movement for Black Lives. Right. So when you're seeing all this work around the Breathe Act, that's Ash. So Che is the director of decarceration strategies at the Racial Justice Action Center, co-coordinating the campaign to close and repurpose the Atlanta City Detention Center. She also serves as the Community Safety Program Coordinator at Vision Change Wind Consulting, co-designing safety and security trainings for movement organizations. Monica Ray Simpson, artivist, activist, singer, drummer, all the things, queer Black woman, native North Carolinian, has been organizing extensively around human rights abuse, the prison industrial complex, racism, anti-Black racism, systemic violence, reproductive injustice, and violence against Black women in the South. Monica's the ED at Sister Song and the creator of Artists United for Reproductive Justice, which is a project of Sister Song that works to create a platform for artists to collaborate on replicable art that furthers the reproductive justice movement. Because we can't have a movement without art and beauty, right? And so Tamika is an organizer, doula, midwifery apprentice, writer. Also, at some point, we need to get a text thread or something so to talk about how y'all do all of this with all this time y'all got, and still manage to look fabulous. And Tamika is also an unschooling mama who's passionate about and active in struggles that affect Black women's lives. She's a consultant with Winds of Change Consulting and a founding member of the Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund and Just Georgia. This is our amazing panel. Y'all, my goodness, we could just bask in all of that for a second. Y'all breathing and taking care of yourselves this year? This year that's almost over now. Can you believe it? So, my first question to you all, and this is really a chance for you to, I just gave the quick and dirty of the who you are, but would love to hear more but through the lens of this question, want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and some of your work, especially some of the work you've been doing in 2020. So please tell me and your fellow panelists and the folks who have jumped on to listen, what is freedom to you? And let's start with Monica. Just gonna go in order on my screen.
Word. Peace and blessings, everybody. It's really great to be here, to be moderated by the amazing Nia, and to be on this panel with all of my beautiful comrades. And thank you all for choosing to be in this space with us today. Freedom is a word that has been like sitting in my heart space, in my sacral space, my root chakra, for quite some time, because I've been really going back and forth, like, what does freedom mean to me now? I think that whenever I started doing this work of social justice, of reproductive justice, and all of that, I had this one definition of freedom, and I was just ready to run with that. And over these past few years, over this year in particular, I've had to really reevaluate what that means. And so today, as I was thinking about that, it came to me kind of poetically. So I'm gonna share it to y'all in that way. Is that cool? So freedom to me is a soul song. When I think about soul music, gospel music, that's at the root of me. Freedom is that. It is that feeling that you get whenever you hear that soul music, when you are singing it. It feels as if you are weightless, as if there is no care in the world, because the music encapsulates you and you are able to just move freely in your own being without anything else really, kind of coming into play in your life. Like, it's a soul song for me. Freedom is a decadent meal, a decadent healthy meal that makes my body feel full, my belly feel full. It gives me energy, it nourishes me. Freedom to me is an elder's rock and a hum. When I think about the elders that I grew up with in rural Union County, North Carolina, and I would see them rocking on the front porch, humming their songs, that was freedom. They had made it to a point in their lives where they were able to sit free and just hum and allow the heat and allow the sweat and to allow the sweetness of the southern breeze to just take them away. That's freedom to me. Freedom is no fear. I get that from Nina Simone, right? Like, she is such a person that I look up to. I live by her quote that it is an artist's duty to reflect the times. And so it's about having no fear and being able to move in this world and make my own decisions and self-determine at my own will how I navigate my own life. Freedom to me is the power of the erotic. When I think about the words of Audre Lorde and the ability to sit in pleasure, the ability to be able to own the beauty of our bodies and the need for connection and intimacy, but also the power that the erotic gives us to move our work, that is freedom for me. Freedom for me is, it's being able to get that feeling that it's like a fresh baby out of the womb, right? That is freedom. When I think about the midwives and doulas who are ushering this new life and this new light into the world, and those first moments of when that baby breaks through into onto this planet, into this realm, that is freedom to me. So I feel like that piece just really talks about my need to be connected to my creativity and my art, my need to be connected to the power of my sexual and reproductive health, and to really thinking about the need of our elders in this moment and learning from their wisdom and what they've been able to accomplish over their life. So that's freedom to me.
Thank you, Monica. I was just writing in the chat that you're giving me, whew, chill. I feel that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Che, what about you?
Mm, yes, thank you, Monica. I just feel like, yeah, art really tells us what's true, you know? And I think that for me, freedom is being able to call out a lie, call a lie a lie. And I think that in my work right now, there are so many lies that the state tries to sell us as truth. There's this lie that in order for us to get access to resources, to mental health, to food, that we somehow have to take part in and be criminalized by the state. This lie that for people to be able to get through and get past addiction or homelessness, that they somehow have to go through a diversion court or some other form of punishment in order to get rehabilitation. And that's just such a lie. It's such a lie that the state has to control our ability to access health and wellness. And I really appreciate the way that art can just cut through what can really feel like policy jargon and trash and get to the truth in a way that sometimes our words don't do that. The other place where I feel freedom is just, it's really our ability to do justice work without fear. I think in this moment, maybe some folks take for granted that justice work it's choosing to put ourselves in positions of visibility and danger. In some ways, it's choosing to put ourselves up front and say, I know that that comes with state surveillance. I know that that comes with violence from the state. I know that that comes with making sure my nonprofit stays in compliance because they're forever coming for us. And I just want to name that we shouldn't have to do that. That shouldn't be a part of our movement work. And yet we navigate that all the time, that sense of fear and that acknowledgement that there are threats against our movements. So for me, freedom is just being able to do this work and not have to look over our shoulders to worry if the state or the right is coming for us, because the work is hard enough. Just getting through the regular day is hard enough without having to also defend our lives constantly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Shay. I think about I for my my work with PP, I sometimes I'm writing, doing op-eds and things, and my little sister every time is like sort of gripped with fear and panic around what that means for her Black sister to be vocal about the work that she does about access to abortion care. And sometimes I even take for granted my own family's concern, right? Like I'm not sometimes because we could be so in the work that we aren't even necessarily thinking about that safety all the time. So thank you for sharing that and lifting that up. Ash, what is freedom to you?
I mean, what they said and what Tamika's about to say. I mean, y'all know me. Y'all know me sometimes better than I know myself, for better and for worse. And so, the first thing I did when I started thinking about what freedom means to me was go to y'all know I was an English major in another life. And I think words really matter. And the definition of words is really something that interests me, and who gets to define them. And so the first thing I did was go see what white people say freedom means, right? I went to the dictionary. And in the dictionary, because I'm a nerd, I accept it. What it said was that freedom essentially is the power or the right to act, to speak, to think, I would add to be, as one wants without hindrance or restraint, right? That freedom is when you can live a life not under the power or control of other people, or confined or imprisoned, et cetera, right? And then what I realized was like, we all too often make like finger painting into science when it comes to defining what freedom is, right? It's actually really simple. Before I tell you my very simple definition of it, I want to walk y'all through the steps that my brain walked me through to get to my very simple answer. The first thing that came to my mind is like, freedom is not getting stuck just in responding to the problems of the world, right? Like freedom would actually be a world where we're not just getting together all the time to be like, all right, y'all, we've got to respond to how fucked up the state is and how fucked up these laws are and how terrible white supremacist violence against our bodies is, da, 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 right? Like it would actually be the absence of the problems, right? And then I was like, man, people are going to say, Ash, like that's cute, but like that's impossible. And so freedom to me then also is living in my utopian vision, our utopian vision. Because actually what I know to be sure, to be true, to be certain, to be my destiny and my inheritance is that all of the demands of my people have said were too fast, too radical, too militant, too impossible, right? Like people told Fannie Lou Hamer that she was nuts. She'd been hit in the head one too many times. They said that Harriet Tubman's vision of an abolitionist state was not possible, that slavery was always going to be the name of the game, right? They've said that we could not defund the police, and we are showing that we can. So I know that what we've been doing for ages is making impossible things possible. And that utopian is not synonymous with impossible. What it means is perfect, right? What it means is ideal. And I believe in that world. So once my brain took me through those steps in getting to the simplest answer to your question, freedom to me looks like not having to do this anymore, right? It looks like us just actually getting to raise our babies, love our lovers, live and like and love in the places that we are, doing the actual living of our lives, the thriving of our lives, and being in that utopian vision that we've collectively arrived to.
If I had a microphone, I would have dropped it for y'all 20 times. Y'all are just, I would love for y'all, for folks who can jump into the chat, let us know how you're feeling, how this is sitting with y'all, because this is, and it just happens to be Sunday, right? Y'all are preaching, and I appreciate it. Tamika, what is freedom to you?
So first of all, these are some hard folks to follow because they are always spitting hot fire. Um, so what I offer is that when I really was thinking about and have thought about what freedom is, I've always started to really conceptualize that based on how I want to raise my kids, right? And so people have met my kids, you know, they are free children. and it is a very different kind of, space to be in. But I think I really, with my husband and I, we talked a lot about how we wanted to create a space in our household where we could practice what it means to be free. And that we had grown up with so many constraints. And so, we were very much socialized inside of this. And so we said, our kids have not been. So let's experiment. Let's see what kind of container we can create and see what happens. And so for us, what we envision freedom being is like, how can we create a container where these little people can be their whole selves? Whatever that is in the world, whatever that looks like, what does it look like for people to be able to be their whole selves? What does it look like for them to be able to pursue lives and passions that fill them up? And for people to not, for there to not be constraints, right? Like, we're not rich people, but we make it happen. So that we can see like what it looks like, what it would feel like for us if we were able to have that same space. And then beyond that, we said, what does it look like for us? What is freedom? What does it look like for us to be able to create communities of joy and pleasure, where we have access to the resources we need, where we have access to love, where we have access to land, where we have access to food, where we have access to spirit, and where we can be all the way in our brilliance, and we can be all the way in our spiritual selves. We can be all the way in all of the facets of who we are. And then I really want to also echo what Che named too, that freedom is the ability to be able to hold people accountable who have been trusted with certain authority in our lives. And so to bring it back to my own household with my kids, if they feel like I'm out of pocket in a certain way, they very much feel free to say, Mom, like what you said, that really hurt my feelings. I didn't like that. And they know that I am accountable to them. And that is the kind of free space that we're trying to build. And so for me, I feel like that is what freedom looks and feels like. And one of the free kids just wandered in the room.
Oh my goodness, y'all. And I'm sitting here because like y'all are filling me with so much. I can't even sit still. Like, I want to get up, but it's Zoom and all I got on is leggings. So, no, I have on like fancy pants. I'm gonna just stay seated. But thank y'all so much for sharing that. And I have been trying to decide if I was gonna bring this into the conversation, but I feel like at this point it wouldn't make sense not to. When we started to talk about holding folks accountable and the freedom, and that freedom is a part of that, or that is a part of what it means for us to be free, it makes me think about the election. It makes me think about just the consistent ways, and we'll talk some more about this also later, that the South is consistently written off and then sort of looked at as this bastion, fingers crossed place, especially when we're thinking about Georgia, in terms of getting, a new president in the White House, despite it not being the, what some folks might consider to be the most ideal candidate. I'm trying to be careful here, and so as we are activating our freedom in terms of consistent accountability, where are the places that you and your folks are starting to think about what it looks like to hold a new administration accountable, understanding that that administration rode into the White House on the backs of our people? And that's for any of y'all to jump in.
I mean, y'all know I have strong feelings about this electoral cycle. I think the, let's start with what is obvious. And Nia, you said this is like, as my comrades Kayla Reed and Jessica Bird so eloquently have said for ages, is movement did that. Movement did that. There's no question, right? If we look at the places that were the stakeholders that CNN and MSNBC and Fox News were watching very closely, they were all places like Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Minneapolis. Can you tell me what's like consistently true about those places?
All Black everything.
They're where we are, right? They're places where not only we are in geographic terms, not only where we are in terms of population density, they also are very much where we have been dedicated to building movement infrastructure for decades, people. We knew that Biden was going to win, not because we liked him or because we were so excited about him or because we had been organizing on his behalf in all those places. We knew he was going to win the popular vote, at least, because it's where we've been building people power, right? So I want to start there. I want to be clear that all of us in the movement for Black lives, and I would articulate that most of us across all of the social movements that are represented throughout the conference, know for certain that we were not encouraging an electoral strategy or the intervention of an electoralized tactic for the sake of a savior. That's, it's Sunday. I just got to be truthful that the savior that I talk about in my lived experience was not Biden or Harris, right? And quite frankly, was not anybody up or down the ballot that I filled out on November 3rd. What I was choosing when I filled out those bubbles was not my allegiance to one particular party, was not my belief in any individual saviors. My bubble filling was because I was choosing my next targets. And so I think this question really matters, right? Because we have built a really broad y'all. Like when I think about folks that are now spouting out the politics of abolition, people that are now spouting out the politics of reproductive justice, of body autonomy, of gender justice, of Black liberation and fighting against anti-Black violence and white supremacy, what I see is that we have successfully, on the backs and the shoulders of our elders and ancestors, built up the largest social movement in US history, y'all. We have politicized, we have mobilized tens of millions of people who now are like, all right, so we did that, what next, right? They're asking good questions. What does it mean that, yeah, we can say that we have touched like tens of millions of people, up to 60 some odd million people, but 70 some odd million people still voted for a white supremacist, fascist, authoritarian, ridiculous human being, right? There's still yet work to be done. And again, because we were choosing our next targets, I think it's critical for us to remember that big we that we built can't be dissolved yet, right? If we're actually going to be able to see come to fruition the demands that brought that united front together, both very literally the united front of the front line, but also the united front of this popular movement that is building a mass force, then we actually have to stick it out, right? This is not the time for us to dissolve these relationships across our sectoral differences. This is an opportunity to lean in even heavier, because what we know is that, again, our colleagues, the folks that have been elected, will not do the right thing just because they're good people. They will only do the right thing and not segregate our demands if we utilize the people power to make it impossible for them not to, right? So when we go into the first 100 days, my question to folks in the reproductive justice movement is, what do you want? What do you want, right? Let's get rid of Hyde. Let's pass the Breathe Act. Let's pass the Thrive Agenda. Let's make sure that we get a red, black, and green New Deal. Let's make sure that we're going in with a coalition of forces to make sure that we get what we want and demand of the Biden-Harris administration, if they are to make it to Pennsylvania Avenue eventually, and the new Congress, that we get what we want. And I think the very, very, very last thing that I would say is that we are going to get blamed, right? When I think about let me rewind that. We are being blamed, right? Like the first thing that happens after a win, like what we just made possible, is that then center and right forces are like, well, we would have done better if it hadn't been for those radical reproductive justice movement people. And man, like these Black folks just can't be pleased. We got a Democrat in office and y'all still mad. Why y'all mad at us? We didn't do nothing to you and right? Like we're getting blamed. Defund is the reason that the Dems didn't do better, right? That's what we're already hearing. When actually what we know, let me tell you what we know. And this is, I know y'all already know this, so I'm just reminding you of what you already know. What we already know is that for every place, people's candidates, folks that are accountable to our movement, ran on our political agenda, they won. Look at Cori Bush, and right? Look at Cori Bush. Look at all of the folks up and down the ballot that actually ran on our values and made it. And then look at the folks that didn't. Look at how they played to the center or to the right in hopes of pulling them further left. Look at the people that wouldn't actually say what they believed in and what their policy priorities would be for the sake of catering to folks that don't believe or live or love like we do. They didn't do well. So I think what we know in this electoral cycle and should be leaning into as we're planning for what's next is that we should be demanding what we deserve and not just what we would concede to, good people, because we can actually win it. The people are on our side, the win is in ourselves. And I think that all we have to do to continue to be successful is actually believe like we actually have the power to give it, right? Like that's actually where we are. It's ours to lose.
Absolutely.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Monica.
No, I just want to build on what Ash is saying, because I think that I think she's absolutely right. This is the time for us to build those deeper connections and alliances across all of our work. And one of the things I want to uplift in that, to bring out a specific example, especially for those of us who are doing reproductive justice work in this country, a lot of people are able to get in with us on the birth justice work. They get in on it when we're talking about maternal mortality, when we're talking about infant mortality, when we're talking about maternal care. Our comrades and those who are in elected positions, they are ready to get down with that and they can move with that because it's a moral message they can get in on. Whenever we talk about sexual health, whenever we talk about abortion specifically, that's where we start to see a bit of a splinter and people not being as out loud about our issues as we are about some of our other comrades' issues. And so I think we have an opportunity. I don't see this as a negative thing. I see it as an opportunity, like what Ash was asking us about, what do we want? I want us to actually be able to say each other's messages and our work out loud and very clear for the world to hear as we step into this new administration, so that this new administration will not use our issues like abortion in particular as a wedge issue. I think another thing that comes up for me too, that I think is important for us to be to start thinking about our offensive strategy around is the courts, right? Especially for those of us in the repro world, in a particular kind of way, because we've had to beat back those abortion bans last year and all of them fell down to the courts. When we think about how the courts have been stacked up against us very intentionally by this current administration, even all the way up to SCOTUS. And I was just reading about the case that just went before the Supreme Court, Fulton versus City of Philadelphia, right? Where there is an adoption agency in Philadelphia, a Catholic agency that doesn't want to allow LGBTQ parents to be able to access their services. And Amy Coney Barrett, who we all watched make that confirmation happen, one of the statements that she made in that particular case was, oh, if we make this happen for this adoption agency, are we giving, the ability to these hospitals to force people to have abortions? She literally made that big of a leap in an argument, right? So we're paying attention to things like that, where there are very intentional moves being made by our opposition to get closer and closer to dismantling Roe, which will be detrimental for our communities, which is connected to all of the work that we do. So I'm pulling out these very specific examples to just build on what Ash is saying around the fact that the way that we run defund, because we're going to say that all day, every day, we need everybody on the other side that's doing that to also say, and abortion, and sexual and reproductive health, and all the different things. And when they start to see us saying those things more explicitly out loud with each other, I think they will start to understand the real people power that we have built that has made these wins happen that we saw this past election season.
Absolutely. And what Monica, what I'm hearing from what you're saying too, is that as we are thinking about freedom and liberation, is that we cannot, as folks who are moving towards a place of striving for Black liberation, striving for Black freedom, cannot write off abortion and sexual and reproductive health in the way that, the progressive left has done for so often. And when you talk about the courts, what I see, what I feel like we've seen is that this sort of consistent drumbeat of the rights and of antis to play the long game, right? And like to be consistent about it and play it and say, finally, they are starting to see the fruits of that labor. Ash, the other one, I was thinking about what you were saying in terms of choosing your next target, right? And thinking about this next 100 days. And I know that a lot of folks woke up on the day after the election and started to plan, what their work was going to look like for midterm elections and what their work was going to look like in 2024. And I was consistently sort of hearing people say, well, people are just, people who are voting for him are voting against their own best interests. And I finally just started to push back on folks and say, like, if that is your analysis, then your plan is going to be flawed, right? Your plan is flawed because your starting place is flawed if we aren't actually realizing that whiteness is the best currency that you can have in the United States of America. And so people aren't actually voting against their best interests. I could go off on a tangent on that, but did anyone else want to jump in on this particular question?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to, I just wanted to build on something that Ash named about, like, that we have been able to build this large movement and we can't dissolve it. And I also want to urge us to like do the work of expanding it. And especially, I'm going to beat my little Black country drum, especially expanding to rural communities and to Black country folks. There are a lot of us out there. And the reality is that the issues that we talk about that are at the top of our platform are so much more dire in those communities. So our work with Just Georgia, we're working in South Georgia around racialized violence and extrajudicial violence. And so we see, folks have kind of forgotten about Ahmaud Arbery. But beyond that, also, there have been so many more police violence, incidents of police violence and extrajudicial racialized violence in rural South Georgia throughout this year. When we talk about we talk about Julian Lewis, who was killed by a Georgia State trooper on the side of a dirt road. Just literally, cop got out and just shot him. Just that was it. And then we also think about another young man elder who was just killed I think 2 weeks ago in Sylvester, Georgia. And so these cases continue to happen in rural Georgia. We think about access to healthcare, think about maternal mortality. We talk about the lack of access to labor and delivery rooms, the lack of access to hospitals, period. We think about Irwin County Detention Center in Irwin County, Georgia, and the forced sterilization that happened in other gynecological procedures that happened in that prison, but also that happened in the community surrounding that prison because the doctor in that case also co-owned the hospital. And so when we think about all the issues that we're talking about and how they're so dire in rural communities for Black rural folks, and those folks do not get attention, they don't get the limelight, and when we think about Glenn County, not Glenn County, we think about where Statesboro, Georgia, and that Ogeechee Judicial Circuit, the DA in that circuit, that DA's office has never had a single Black person employed, not even as a janitor, people. And so that is what Black folks, when they face the criminal legal system, that is what they're going up against. And so we have to be talking to Black rural folks. When folks are talking about South Carolina in the election, I'm like, you can talk about South Carolina as much as you want, but if there are no resources to organizing and to talking to folks in Black rural communities in South Carolina, then you have nothing to say about South Carolina. And I say that as a South Carolina native. So I just want to lift up I think that's part of the work that we have to do. And I think that the reason that Georgia went the way it went is because folks who do GOTV work are serious about engaging Black rural folks who are outside of the Atlanta metro area.
Thank you so much. And so another thing that I'm hearing that is just sort of this thread that's coming through all of you is that this path to freedom that we're on, we don't get there by sort of picking and choosing which of us we want to come along. We can't not engage our rural folks. We can't not talk about the folks who've had abortions. We have to be thinking about and moving forward with all of us. So I have for the last 10 years of my life lived in the South. And I say, all the time, my dad was born and raised in Meridian, Mississippi. I call myself a first generation Northerner. And my grandmother on my mom's side picked cotton in Brandon, Mississippi at the time that she turned 3 years old. And they escaped from that place running north to Minnesota. and that's how my family got north. But there's a power and a beauty in the South that runs through me despite where I was born, right? And I know that some of the most innovative and exciting and creative things that we are seeing right now in terms of organizing and freedom fighting is coming out of the South. What is the current role? Because I think that people sort of romanticize the civil rights movement and think back on that, but right now, today, y'all are badass, right? And the work that y'all are doing is so amazing. So what's the current role of the South in the fight for Black liberation?
Yes, I too am someone who loves the South. Have been here for about 7 years, and I'm not from here. And I think that as someone who moved to Atlanta and originally is from Hawaii, I can really attest to the ways that regionalism really functions as a tool that both the right use and that Democrats use as a tool to be able to gain power and to legitimize white supremacy. I think specifically the way that we see that manifesting around the elections, just to draw it back to that last question, is really underestimating the right and continuing this very old narrative around the right being dumb or that their arguments are stupid, and really kind of dismissing and pushing them off as the ideas of poor Southern white folk, and therefore deciding that they don't need engagement. And I just want to say that is regionalism, right? Like that is capitalism. That is about shaming folks without money, without higher education. And yes, they are white racist folks who voted for Trump. Let's be clear. But it doesn't help us or save us to write off those opinions or to decide that they're stupid. I think the right is smart, just like we're smart. I think there's diversity amongst the right. And I think that there's strategic planning, just like we are. They have butcher paper, just like we do. They're out there imagining a world that's not this world, just like we are. Their world just looks real different than ours. So I think that one thing that we can fall into as folks on the left is, Democrats will also use regionalism to justify white supremacy, right? Democrats will say that door knocking doesn't work and that the only way to get voters out is through text machines. We know right here in Atlanta that door knocking is what has gotten the campaign to close and repurpose the jail to where it is now. We know that door knocking is what got us to the place where we could reform cash bail in Atlanta. We know that door knocking and talking to real people on their porches is what leads to campaign wins. And I think that that's a strategy that really finds root in the South. I think there are a lot of regions who do base building in different ways, but I think the South brings a magic to it and a rigor to it that a lot of other regions don't have. And I think that because of that, we have expertise. And I just want to lift up that the strategy of base building is one that takes years of practice. It is a practice that you can do for 7 or 8 years and still not be very good at. And that there are folks who are very much brain surgeons of base building who are living in the South and doing work in the South who need to be informing national strategy in a way that they're just not right now because our movement suffers from regionalism. The last thing that I'll say is, I think that because we are so good at base building and relationship building here, there's also a way that I have seen Southern folk, and especially folks who are born and raised, really lean into generative debate and conflict in a way that, coming from New York, can be challenging. And that means that, your cousin who does not believe in defund, who very much believes that, police should just live in our neighborhoods, that police should look like us, and that that's the answer, right? That would have kept Ahmaud Arbery alive, that would have kept Rayshard Brooks alive. We have to engage with that cousin, right? That there is still a movable middle, and our movable middle is Black. It's Black people who do not believe in defund, who do believe that Black people are being killed by the cops and care about what solutions will get us to fewer Black people getting killed by the cops. And we can't write those folks off anymore. You know, we can't decide that they don't belong inside panels. And we have to just get used to having deep political conflict and still being okay, right? Still being in relationship and still knowing that we love and care for each other. And to be able to do that online without coming for each other, to do that at our, you know, at our tables without coming for each other. And know that at the end of the day, it's relationship that's really carrying us through this movement. And I just think that's something that Southern organizers are really badass about and do with a lot of rigor and love.
Thank you so much, Che.
Yeah, thank you, Che. I think another piece of like what we folks can learn from Southern organizers and organizations is how you get stuff done when nobody believes in you enough to give you money to do it. so often, even when you're inside of national organizations, often that kind of Southern relationship building, base building work is not funded. People don't understand it. People don't want to resource it. It's so hard to get, especially when those organizations are Black led, especially if those organizations are led by Black women. It is so hard for folks to get resources, and we have been able to move shit with little to no resources in the South. And I think also, I think that so much of what people were understanding in a Trump administration is that I think in a lot of places people were used to it, even on a federal level and even in their states and their localities, battling with lawmakers, but still kind of seeing, you know, the other side, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And so often in the South, we have to reconcile with the reality that most of these folks are not on our side. They are, like, if you're doing labor movement work, these folks are anti-labor. They are, you don't have the unions are not loved and respected. And if you are doing RJ work, they are anti-abortion, they are anti-resourcing, all of the things. And you still have to put up a fight, and you still have to figure out how to develop a strategy in the face of the fiercest opposition. And I think that is something that, when Trump got elected, I remember saying that in a meeting that, oh, now, folks who were like, Hillary's going to get in, and so we'll have the opportunity to pass this and that. We're like, oh, now you should listen to the folks in Georgia and Louisiana and Mississippi who've never had someone at the top who was on your side, who you could just, we've not had that experience. And so we've had to be very creative. We've had to be very strategic. We've had to build deep and broad simultaneously, which is something that a lot of folks don't do. They build broad, but we have to build deep too. And we have to do them both simultaneously. And I think those are things, some of the strategies and things that I think the South really brings to the table.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will admit that as a moderator, I was a bit ambitious, and I had so many questions on my list. And I was like, we'll be able to get through so many. That is not exactly true. But I feel like this conversation, I mean, I don't know if y'all are watching the chat, but y'all are blowing folks' minds. You're blowing my mind. You are blowing my heart. I am just so in love with what is coming out of this, and so grateful for your brilliance. So we have a question in the chat, and I want to jump to that. And if other folks have questions, please just drop it in the chat. So Che, this question is for you. This could actually be for a multitude of folks, because Che was talking about the Southern rigor that allows for this to happen. But how do you balance that relationship building with the movable middle and maintaining safety, especially as Black, queer, and trans people?
Yeah, I'll kick off, but I think all of us have a lot to add to this. I would actually back up, Zoe, and first just say, let's all commit to practicing debate with people we love, with people who are safe. Let's actually practice explaining defund, answering the hard questions that we're going to always get, right? Talking about abolition and not ignoring that there is still murder and rape, and that our communities don't have capacity to hold all murder and rape right now, right? So if we can stay inside of those difficult questions with people we love and just practice answers that our aunties would understand, that our cousins, that our neighbors would relate to, I feel like that's a really strong place to begin. And then I think from there, it's really deciding who makes sense to have these debates with, right? Everyone's movable middle is going to look a little bit different because everyone's politics and social positions look different, right? So for me, as a cis, light skinned, able bodied person, my relatability to folks in the world is going to be very different than someone with different identities, right? I'm going to use that because I care about our movement, and I'm going to practice discomfort in my debate with people. And I'm going to notice, like, where does debate and discomfort teeter into disrespect? And I'm going to shut down conversations that teeter into disrespect. But I'm willing to be uncomfortable. I'm willing to feel tightness in my chest, to feel hot, to feel like crying or yelling with people who I don't love and who are not in relationship with me, because I care about building our base. And I think that the more we can engage in those conversations, even if we don't convert them, right, we're practicing. We're getting stronger at this debate so that we can have the next conversation with someone else from a more centered place. And I think that that's an important organizing skill for all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nia, can I add to that?
Of course.
Yeah.
So I would tell you no.
Yeah, sometimes you might have to, sis. I don't know. But I will say to add on to what Shay was saying, what comes to mind is the work that started 10 years ago in Georgia around a billboard campaign. I don't know how many folks remember that, but 10 years ago, these billboards came to Georgia that said the most dangerous place for an African-American child is in the mother's womb. And because of that work, a coalition and a framing of Trust Black Women was built to counteract that. And in that, it wasn't just the opposition of the white evangelicals and folks who we normally go up against in these abortion conversations. It wasn't just them, you know, in the conversation. It was this Black genocide conversation that got connected to that, where there were actual Black folks who were grabbing onto this message saying that Black women were having too many abortions and shaming Black women for their reproductive decision making. And so we had to like really engage in thoughtful, hard ass conversations with our own people around what it means to self-determine and what does it mean to actually have reproductive justice. And one of the things that came out of those conversations, whether it was the community-based participatory research that we did, whether it was like the direct conversations that we had with for folks, was to actually get clear about who is really the enemy here, right? That was one of the things that really helped us really have those conversations, because we're not each other's enemy. We may have two very different views on where we feel, well, where we land on this particular issue. But if we actually look at what is our target and who are we both actually going against, it really helped us in those conversations, and it helped us shift the pain and like all the things that was coming up from us into the right place. And so I think that's just another thing to mention when thinking about having these hard debates, knowing who your movable middle is, how to be in practice around that, is also determining and making those clear determinations of like, who's the target here? Who are we actually, like, where can we find our common connection of like where we both want to see, what's the change we both want to see, and who are we actually going up against that we could actually be in community on. And that really did change that conversation, because what we realize is that everybody's not going to be down with abortion. There's too much emotional stuff. There's too much, I'm using abortion very specifically, but there's a lot of stuff that gets wrapped up into people's own emotionalism around this particular issue. So I'm not trying to evangelize you to come join in the ranks and be like abortion out loud every day. But what I am trying to ask you is, are you willing to be a bridge or a barrier? Right? And what we don't need you to be is a barrier to other people being able to make their own decisions. Are you willing to be a bridge in a way that you can allow people to move as they need to be able to access what they need? So those are some of the things that came out for us in that particular with that particular piece of work that was rooted right here in Atlanta, Georgia, that I feel like is important for these larger national conversations to understand, because we really shifted an entire narrative with that work. And that narrative is continuing to like shift culture of Black women, from politics to healing to everything, just because of that particular message. That's just something that came out from that work too.
Thank you so much, Monica. You can give me 1 second. I just want to just say thanks so much, Monica, for laying that out and bringing up trust, and bringing in trust Black women into this conversation, because it was important in that way, around like really targeting and talking about the Black women's bodily autonomy and the necessity of that, but also like trust Black women is a foundation for my work at Planned Parenthood, right? You can't stand with Black women unless you trust Black women. And so to me, trust Black women has been so important, not just around that particular billboard fight, but about the ways that we have made sure that Black women's voices, needs, and opportunities have been deeply embedded into conversations around sexual and reproductive health. Ash?
That was a word. Everything that Che and Monica said, I would plus. I also just want to say something that also is leaning into saying uncomfortable truths. I think that we need to also have some really honest conversations about the difference between safety and just being uncomfortable, right? Like, I think we have to be honest that the world that is not the world that we want to be. And that, quite frankly, even for some of the most privileged of us, having those debates, particularly with some of our middle forces, aren't safe for us either, right? They're not safe. And even if they are, like, safety is relative, and discomfort and unsafety are two different things. I feel like all too often we don't lean into debate under the guise of spaces not being safe, when really we just feel uncomfortable. And so I want to push, and I also want, like, this feels so connected to what you were saying earlier, Nia, around best interest, because I feel like sometimes this question comes up all the time, right? Like, how do we make sure that the most marginalized get centered and are safe, right? That's like fundamental question of the 21st century social movements of our time, right? Why that's why so many Black women are leading. It's why there's so much of an intentional intervention around queer and trans and gender nonconforming and intersex leadership, et cetera. And that is dope. That's what makes our movement so successful. And what's real is don't nobody can talk about the safety of Black trans women, gender nonconforming and intersex folks than themselves, right? It's like they actually, I would be out of pocket to say what is and is not safe for them. Because what's real is they are leading me and taking risks every day that are beyond my definition of what is safe for them. And I think that's the point, comrades, is that, like, when we talk, like, the thing that, I mean, y'all know I had like a little bit of a Facebook temper tantrum about all these people, and it happens every electoral cycle, around people talking about the South and country people's best interests. Y'all know that pisses me the fuck off, right? And shout out to Eshe for what you said in the chat, dog. Like, that's an absolutely true fact. People are talking about us. The camera is pointed at us. They're pointing it at us, not as Southern people, right? Not as country people, to talk about us as the deficit, as the problem, as causation for harm, and not to talk about, like, our centuries of being the pushback to every social ill in this country, right? So I want to talk about best interest, and I'm gonna make you feel good about it for a second, and then I'm gonna make you feel bad about your own complicity in it, and then I promise I'm gonna end it with you feeling better about yourself. So what happens is, like, people that are not us, right? Because we're good people, always talk about how Southern folks, rural folks, working class folks don't vote in their best interest. How Black men, right? Black men as a block didn't vote in their best interest when 86% of Black people voted for the Democratic Party. Get out of here, right? Get out of here. You talking about the South, right? And the children of the Great Migration in the Midwest, but look at the places that actually turn the tide of the electoral cycle. You want to talk about best interest? You call where I'm a hillbilly. Rednecks are in my lineage, right? Like, I am from Appalachia. And when people think about where I'm from, they call it Trump country, right? When they say Trump country, they're not talking about Atlanta. They're not even really talking about Orlando and Miami. They're talking about people that live and look and love like me, right? But if I asked you where Donald Trump was from, what would you say? He's from Queens, y'all. If I asked you where Ronald Reagan was from, You would tell me California, right? At our worst, we gave this country Jimmy Carter, right? We gave this country Stacey Abrams. Like, let's talk. You want to talk about best interests? What does it look like for the South to help support our comrades in California and in New York to make sure that they do not continue to create the conditions in which folks like Reagan and Trump would actually exist? You know what I'm saying? That's actually the work. Let me help you, right? I think that in closing, I told you I was going to hold you accountable, and then I was going to make you feel better about it. So for every time that we talk about what is good for other people and our responsibilities to create it for them, that is the antithesis of my understanding of Southern freedom movement building, right? The point of Southern freedom movement building is that people did for themselves through mutual aid and accountability, right? It was not charity. So every time that we talk about like how we're going to make a world where reproductive justice is reality so that everybody can be great, you're considering yourself as the great savior of our people when actually those middle forces and those left forces that Shay was talking about are already doing it. Because guess what? They practice debate every day. Those some thick-skinned people. They on Twitter. My brother is a gangster disciple, and him and his homies, they be going back and forth online all day long. I'm the wimp in the conversation, right? So though that is true, and though we all center ourselves in thinking about how we will make this better world for all people, while simultaneously conceding territory and conceding people who we're not comfortable with because we actually don't like them very much. We don't actually always like poor people because we don't think that they're as smart as us. We don't always like trans, queer, gender non-conforming folks because we're not always comfortable with all the radical things that they're saying. We don't always work with young people because we think that they're too annoying and they're doing things out of pocket. They're actually the center of the universe, y'all. They're actually the reasons why we're being able to build successfully so far. And so I think that in closing, what I would offer is that how are you defining risk? How are you defining solidarity? How are you defining right relationship with directly impacted people? Because I think that if we actually grappled with the ways that we don't feel comfortable and we use that discomfort to be an excuse for saying that we don't feel safe or that we know more than other people about what makes for safety for them, I think we actually would be able to help support our people reimagining a world beyond policing, right? Reimagining a world where defund is the norm. I think that is actually the intentional and consistent nuanced work that we need to be doing right now.
Ash, you better just, okay, y'all, bye. It's been a great panel. I'm done. Just kidding. So we're a little over time, but I do want to ask this question. Because, you know, part of what you said early on, and Monica brought it in too, is like this, how do we thrive? How are we experiencing pleasure? How are we experiencing joy? Black queer joy is a slap in the face to all of these systems that try to keep their foot on our neck. And that, you know, coupled with the shit show that 2020 has been, it's a wonder that any of us find space to smile, you know. But I know for me, freedom is like when I'm talking to my sister on the phone and I can throw my head back and just laugh with reckless abandon until I can't, you know, until my chest is hurting or my stomach is upset, right? What are some of the ways, and we need to, if we could just do this quickly and then we'll close, but what are some of the ways that you've been intentionally finding and experiencing joy in 2020? Monica, let me start with you. And I got to just call on folks.
No worries, sure. I would say that it has been me leaning into my creative self more. I think that when I signed up to be an executive director, nobody tells you what the hell that really means until you do it. And it is the most amazing, life-fulfilling, crazy ass decision that you'll ever make in your life. And, you know, I've been at Sister Song now for 10 years this year. This is my 10th anniversary. And I've been an executive director since 2013. And I went on sabbatical early this year, and I was in a deep healing practice where I had to realize that I gave away all of me to become what I thought I needed to be in order to be a leader in this work, which had no parts of me in it. I was moving, you know, just in a very robotic fashion, you know, and most people wouldn't even realize it about me, but there was nothing about me that was in that. And so I had to have a reckoning with myself around who I am and who I am called to be, and really get reconnected to my purpose and to my gifts in this world. And that has been bringing me joy of just reminding myself of who I really am and standing in my power and creating from that place and not being scared to do that. And I think that that question around risk, especially as you think about where your positionality is in movement, looks different for different people. And I felt like I had a lot of risk because there were people that I was responsible for, you know, my staff, my team, my people. And so that can put a huge barrier on, or I can say I put a huge barrier on me of like really stepping into the parts of me that brings me pleasure and light and love. And I had to make a serious decision to reckon with that and to come on the other side of that. So leaning into my creativity, naming everywhere that I go that I am an artist and I am a cultural strategist is what I've been doing from the beginning of time, and that my title doesn't determine who I am, but my purpose does. So that's what's bringing me joy.
Thank you so much. Che, we'll do Che and then Ash and then Tamika, and I'll close us out.
Yeah, I really want to lift up the babies and how smart they are. I got the pleasure of leading a security training with little Marley Mar. And Marley really brought some security knowledge to this crew, and aliveness and joy that I think a lot of us needed. And there's so many young people who are really hungry for movement work. And I think that the more that we can get folks really engaged in and actually not separate out into like youth organizing over here, adult organizing over here, but having multi-generational spaces, it's good for all of us. It gives us all life. It keeps us all sane. It gives us all childcare. And I just think it's super important.
Thank you. Ash?
Facts. I mean, I have a joyful life right now. I think there's a lot to be happy about. I think that my optimism is not naive. I think it is informed, right? What's bringing me joy is that we're fucking winning. We're winning. We're winning. We're winning, y'all. Like, it's okay. You can actually let your hair down. You can put your shoulders down a little bit. You can be excited that like we're not just doing this work in vain. That even when it's not like super sexy policy victories, or it's not an electoral victory that makes us like feel like we've won a great battle, what's real is that we are ultimately building the world that our children and our people have always deserved. So I feel joyful because I like to win and I like to celebrate when we do win. I believe in claiming every victory. These language justice heroes and sheroes on this call, these siblings of ours, seeing people being intentional about making sure that these virtual gatherings can be accessible. So shout out to Antonio and Shannon. Y'all bring me joy. I'm excited about like watching these free new African children drive Tamika up a wall. It brings me so much joy. And all of my homies that are raising these babies, these tiny humans, and watching them grow in these virtual ways, and how our children are relating to each other in a time where physical distance is real, but social solidarity is possible. And so, yeah, I think that despite all of the bullshit that 2020 has thrown at us, I feel like we are leaving 2020 in deeper relationship with each other, many of us, than we had when we were kicking it like all the time in meetings and in airports and whatever. Like, I think we've actually had a moment to slow down and be intentional about, y'all that know me know I really believe in courtship. I love it. I'm good at it, all of that. And I think that 2020 was an opportunity for us to decide that we were going to be an intentional relationship with each other in a way that I don't think we had taken all the intentionality to do before, that we really chose each other, supporting each other through the highs and lows of a very difficult year. And that to me is the joy that I will carry into 2021.
Thank you so much. And Tamika, so we just got to know, we got to do a hard stop at 4:10 and go shut us out. We're going to be sucked into the internet ether world somewhere. So Tamika, go ahead.
Go fast. Yeah, so I saw this thing earlier this week that was like, if it's your calling, it'll keep calling. And so this year I've been stepping into some things that had been calling me for a while and I've been putting off. So that's bringing me joy. I've been brewing a lot of tea and drinking a lot of tea, and that's bringing me joy. I've been studying and doing things with my kids. I don't know if y'all saw our little voter guide we put together. That's bringing me joy. We've been doing dance parties and redecorating the house and baking things and eating things I shouldn't be eating. And all of those things are bringing me joy.
Thank you so much. Well, I mean, I'm sure it is very clear, but I want to say that being able to moderate this panel has brought me so much joy. Thank you all so much for everything you do, for the way that you show up for our folks, even when people aren't paying attention, when it's not, when it's not on TV or on the internet, for all the grunt work you do, the long hours you put in, for the love that you have for us and for yourselves. Thank you all so much. So much. It was a pleasure and an honor to be able to spend just this hour with y'all on Sunday. Folks, I know that people are trying to figure out the transcripts. I don't have the answer to that just yet, but we will try to make sure that we get it. Thank you, Spark. Shout out to Crystal. Shout out to all the folks who have made this such a kick-ass conference this weekend. It isn't what we thought it was going to be when we started, but it's the shit right now. Thank y'all. Have a great day, and thank you for joining this panel.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
Thank you.